to another Hype Muni Reviews, where hype comes to die. I'm Skurita, and today we're going to talk about the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So, after my Priscilla video, I was poked from time to time to check this classic of the schlock, the kitsch, all the terms of the rainbow for cheesy, so why not do it for Halloween? I'm not a specialist in musicals, but I really like the genre and watched several, such as The Fiddler on the Roof and Chicago. I was lucky to see this movie nearly completely oblivious. I only knew that Tim Curry played
I'm just a sweet transvestite
and nothing else. So how did it fare? Oh, and it's worthy to mention that as a straight vanilla plain toast guy, I can delve into the LGBTQ themes within this movie since they don't resonate with me. At best, I can give an outsider's perspective. With that out of the way... So, what is it about? The Rocky Horror Picture Show is a 1975 musical horror sci-fi comedy film, directed by Gene Sharman, written by Richard O'Brien, who also plays Riff Raff the Butler, and has the distinction of being the longest played movie of all time. 50 years after its creation and launch, movie theaters still play it somewhere in the globe. It's also considered one of the staples of the LGBTQ movement, influencing a ton of other media to this day. The movie narrates, literally this case with the criminologist narrator played by Charles Gray, the unfortunate events that befell the couple of Barry, played by Brad Majors, and Janet, played by Susan Sarandon, as their car's tire blew up in the middle of nowhere. Without a spare, the couple has to search for help, finding the castle of the extreme eccentric Dr. Frank N. Further, played by the one and only Tim Curry, a self-professed
just a sweet transvestite.
And so the newly eloped couple has to endure what the nefarious doctor has in mind for them. Soundtrack. Yeah, this time soundtrack comes first for obvious reasons. This is a musical after all. This movie hasn't endured so long just due to the bizarre visuals. Its soundtrack and songs are mainly composed of a mix of rock and pop songs at the time, and within this rock you see variants like glam rock or rockabilly. They vary in quality, with the big banger being the time warp that heralds Frank's appearance. And be careful with that one, it will be an earworm. But there are other good hits like Eddie's number. I mean, let's be honest, it's Meat Loaf singing. It's the only worst competitor for Tim Curry. Some are meh enough that I ended skipping them, others are catchy with good lyrics. In my personal tastes, everything ended middle of the road. I've heard better musicals, and I've heard far, far worse. It's good enough to give meat to the musical part of this movie, but not enough to be the main attraction. Visuals. Okay, 3 fun things about what happened when I watched this movie. First, during the intro I said, oh, this reminds me of Not I, which is a play made by Samuel Beckett, who also made Waiting for Godot, the father of the absurdist theatre.
Imagine not suffering. Indeed could not remember offhand when she had suffered less. Unless of course she was meant to be suffering, thought to be suffering.
The barrel when tarantula took to the hills.
The second thing was, while I was watching the credits roll, I thought to myself, oh, they look like a play leaflet. And lastly, oh, the camera looks like it's a theater. And then I paused the movie, checked the internet and discovered that lo and behold, yes, this is actually an adaptation of a theater play. And such, Rocky Horror Picture Show is pretty much akin to several smaller budget adaptations of a play. An interesting case where the camera is often used as the eyes of the audience. The camera is more often than not quite closer to the actors, but keeping everyone important in the frame. Dutch angles help with the weirdness, sometimes zooming over the face of characters as they talk front first, sometimes wiggly in handheld mode following actors as if it was a live TV show. Instead of the back and forth of faces in a dialogue, you just see both people talking in longer shots. And since the sets are far smaller, you won't see big pans or wide shots. There is also an interesting focus on upwards and downward angled shots. Everything is more personal. You don't see this kind of style anymore. Sometimes things get a bit too frantic for my tastes, with wobbling or quick cuts, but it's just my personal opinion. The visuals themselves are also loaded with references and symbolism. For example, right at the start there is a reference to American Gothic, a painting by Grant Wood. Barry and Janet exchange vows in their own way in front of a billboard with a Cupid's heart. Rocky is born at a bathtub filled with rainbow motifs, etc, etc. I could stay all day counting the visual representations, but I would just boil down to they are quite efficient in showing that Barry, and Janet are the classical straight-laced straight couple thrown into a debauchery of sexual insanity. Everything alludes to cheap B-horror movies from Dracula to Frankenstein, and of course Forbidden Planet gets a direct mention. Since this movie has a shoestring budget, instead of fighting in the cheesy, it leans on it and makes it part of the whole deal. Sets are shamelessly reused even if it doesn't make sense to do so. Parts of said sets are visibly cheap and smaller. To wrap up this festival of weirdness with a rainbow queer ball, the costumes and makeup are also quite purposeful, bizarre, yet at the same time really freaking good. Riff Raff is obviously based on the usual hunchback henchmen of the villain, minions and guests dress as if, well, if it was a gay goth parade, and Frankenfurter isn't iconic for no reason. His makeup is really good at making the audience focus on his eyes and eyebrows, black and white contrasting as if he was a long-lost band member of Kiss. Speaking of, there are several references to rock such as Iggy Pop and David Bowie, and yes, Meatloaf shows up. So yeah, the snippets you've probably seen on YouTube and the reference don't give this movie justice in the visual department. It's far weirder and bombastic in the long run. Acting. And to herald this movie and basically carry on its back, none other than Tim Curry himself. It's surprising to learn that this was his first big role because he rocks the high heels and runs with it, literally. With his frantic manner and energetic behavior, he dominates every single scene he is in, even if he isn't the focus. And when it's time to sing, well, he has the pipes to match the legendary status of his eye.
By the way I look, don't judge a book by its cover. I'm not.
The other cast members vary in quality. Sarah and Brad fit their characters, offering a good contrast to the whole weirdness going on without going overly camping themselves. I'd say that from the main cast, the only one to be wooden was Rocky's actor, who absolutely admits such. But it fits the character and the whole idea about this movie being purposefully cheesy. Now, on the musical department, this would be something weird to admit, but for a musical there are way too many songs that go a bit too long. Again, I haven't seen Broadway musicals, mostly movie musicals, and from my experience, generally when it's time to start singing, it's because it's the apex of a poignant scene in order to boost the feelings surrounding it, like a character being overly sad or happy, or people gathering for a party. Here, not only there are several moments where people may start singing due to the smallest of the reasons, like finding them Frankenfurter Castle, they will often join up with other different songs from nowhere, making it feel lengthy. Even then, they are creative, using the bizarre premise and the absurd base to throw curveballs at the viewer constantly. For example, sometimes a musical will feature a good singer and then jump to use the criminologist half singing or not singing, purposefully stiff to contrast with the singer and dancers. Other times, the curveball will be visual, like a recently born man somehow having golden underwear under his bandages. Writing. Okay, this will be weird, but while I watched this movie I was reminded of Barbarella of all things. Yeah, both movies rely on purposefully cheesy cliches of several genres, purposefully cheap props and ludicrous premises, and of course lots of sexualization and subversion through sexualization. If Barbarella is a blend of several kinds of B sci-fis, including horror, Rocky Horror is a blend of several B horror movies, including sci-fi. Frankenstein, vampires, aliens, etc. It starts with the usual couple having their usual car, having their usual problem, and going to the usual haunted manor for help, where the usual mad scientist will put them through the several usual horrors. If Barbarella plays the cliché of the dumb blonde who is meant to be the usual damsel in distress that is constantly but subverts and wins people over as she discovers her sexuality and uses it in her favor, Rocky Horror is the opposite. Here, Janet and Barry have their sexual awakening, but through the traumatizing exploitation from Frank's, which will definitely mess them up for life. The couple arrives at the castle, see the bizarre inhabitants, Frank invites them to see his creation, Rocky, the perfect man, and it's a bit obvious that said creation is to be a living sex toy. From there we see how Frank is a monster, charming but a monster, and how he starts to tweak Janet and Barry to his liking. The story itself doesn't have much content. If you boil it down, it's basically a parody of Frankenstein with lots of sex and awakenings, but the visuals, the purposeful schlock, and the transgression of values gives it bulk. It would be the perfect anti-LGBTQ propaganda movie if it didn't seize its themes and twist them by being so purposefully cheesy it becomes downright deadly to those with high pressure. It's the equivalent of a blaxploitation movie for LGBTQs. LGBTQ ploitation? Gay ploitation? Anyway, it's so absurdly over the top that it can't be taken seriously, and it uses it in disfavor, with several spots where the actors break the fourth wall. It's its strongest point, and when the story tries to stand up on its own, well, after Frank, the star of the show, is introduced, things start to lose steam. The dynamic of the characters presented is interesting, but it's often so padded out with song after song after song that they end up a bit underdeveloped. And since you pile up the songs, the valley between them end up longer and a bit boring. I can't in good faith call these characters complex because I don't see enough context, but they are multifaceted and their relations start interesting. Brad starts open-minded, willing to even enjoy the company of these bizarre people, but closes up immediately after the weirdness starts ramping up. Janet is the opposite, starts frightened, but easily opens up to the doctor, in both ways, and both of them are seduced with the same ease. Yet, when it would be normally time to develop said characters, the plot makes them react again and again to what Frank throws at them, robbing them of any agency and development. Much on the contrary, they actually get worse. Janet Rocky, who by then is firmly established as being just an innocent guy that sought her for help, all in retaliation for her fiancé who had cheated on her, with Frank, who also seduced her hours ago, making her feel like a huge hypocrite. Barry starts proactive and tries to protect Janet, but then just turns into a living lamppost for Frank's shenanigans. Worst of all, there isn't much of a confrontation between the protagonists and their affair, and they don't influence the plot much, which makes them basically an accessory to show how weird Frank is. Speaking of, Frankie is a depraved bastard that tortures, maims, kills, mutilates, and uses people as pieces of meat. He is vain, egoistical, craves to be the center of attention, and to have Rocky all for him, going ballistic when things don't go the way he wants, like people not appreciating his creation, or his creation showing affections to other people. He does make a really compelling villain, but he'd need at least someone strong enough, a character strong enough to properly bounce against. A Van Helsing to his Dracula, if you will. All this story culminates in a rather frustrating ending, which I couldn't really care about any of the characters or be interested in their fate. Bombastic? Yes. Glamorous? Yes. But leaves a lot for interpretation. Sad, but frustrating. And that's all I can say without giving spoilers. How about that? Final thoughts. Yeah, in the end, this wasn't for me. It's not a bad movie by any means, much on the contrary. There are catchy songs, funny beats, and the overall package that solidified itself as a staple of the genre. For the 70s, this movie was absolutely genre-breaking and bombastic. But by itself, it leans more on the confrontation and challenge of norms alongside the shock value, thankfully without being overly gross, and of course the cheesy, and suffers in the other aspects. You have a bombastic villain with a mostly reactive cast. You have lots of songs, but uneven distribution, choking development and leaving long swathes of silence. So either you really like said confrontation and schlock, or like me, you end up a bit lost. Not a love or hate it, just a love a blade. So if the bizarre aesthetics and the cheese interests you, if you're okay with everything else being secondary, try it out. If not, just check Time Warp on YouTube. Spoilers. The scene where Frank seduces the couple one at a time was quite good. Played with shadows. Same dialogue between both characters, probably to symbolize how men and women have the same desires, or to be funny, or both. So, Frank gets angry that Eddie, a delivery rocker that he throws, is stealing the attention away from him. In retaliation, Frank brutally kills Eddie while people watch, which makes weird that Janet and Brent, the guy and the gal, just accept to go to bed with the doctor, even if it's Tim Curry. Now, from there, several bizarre, if not in the good sense, things happen. The uncle of the murderer rocker shows up as if to shake things up, yet nothing happens much. He just ends just going along with Frankie like all the others, even when Frank serves his nephew's flesh disguised as turkey. Just shocked expressions are the meat served, some running, and they are captured. At the same time, the narrative tries to downplay the fact that Frank murdered that guy and served his flesh to his guests by having a song about how Eddie wasn't that much of a good guy in the first place. The ending then proceeds with a drag show. Come on, it's a drag show. I watched Priscilla, that's definitely a drag show. Anyway, back at it. A drag show where all the captured people dancing to Frank's tune, making a pool orgy, and out of nowhere, Frank's servants show up announcing that they are rebelling against his depraved ways. Because he went too far. That would be okay if these servants didn't also torture a man with the brain of a child some scenes ago, and start to just coldly gun down everyone around him. The ending also tries to make Frank sympathetic, with our cannibal doctor delivering a heartfelt musical speech in front of an imaginary crowd, but again, too little context for me for a character that unleashed hell on everyone for a whole movie. It felt to me like an, oh let's just wrap this up already, with the servants nabbing the castle, which is actually a spaceship, yes they are aliens, and returning to their planet, leaving Janet, Brent and the doctor crawling in the mud, so I couldn't care much about what just transpired. Well, that's all for today, happy Halloween everyone, and see you all next time.